I'd like to call this a joint meeting of the City of Elkhorn Architectural Review Board and City Planning Commission and the Historic Preservation Commission meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Harvey,
Here.
Boardman,
Yes.
Carroll,
Here.
Welsh, Brillianthan, Gunyon, Taylor,
Here.
Watke,
Here.
Hunter,
Here.
Stacko,
Here.
Boardman. Again?
Did you call me already?
Yeah, but you're in both groups.
So you're
You gotta
here
answer
twice.
twice,
Yeah, got to.
Megan.
Geestlin,
Here.
Minell,
Here.
Schroeder.
Here. All right, thanks everybody for coming. Allison, you were providing quite a bit of information here. Would you like to recap that for us?
Sure, absolutely. So during our last joint meeting, we had talked about a lot of different things, and one of the things we discussed was possibly amending our ordinance, getting it up to date, and deciding upon whether or not the HPC is going to be an advisory committee to the Plan Commission, or they're going to have their own authority, a quasi judicial authority to make their own decisions. And then hopefully that would allow them to apply for the certified local government. So what I've done and what's enclosed in your packet tonight is just a few different ordinances from other communities. And then online, we have Jason Tisch with the state of Wisconsin, who is here to help answer any questions you might have about potential ordinance changes. And this is really just a time to have discussion. We don't have anything written or in place for you to review for the city of Elkhorn at this point. We just need to decide what direction we're going to go, what updates need to be made, and then we'll go from there. So I'm happy to answer any questions. And Jason, if you have anything to add during any of this conversation, feel free to jump in.
Will do, thanks.
Julie, do you have anything to
Yes.
start off with?
I reviewed a number, in fact, I reviewed all of the information that was in the packet. And a lot of it is repeat information. I observed that in general, the layouts of all of the ordinances seem to be relatively the same. I think they all go back to that original one that the State Historical Society sent out around 1990 that gave them a template. So that's why everybody is kind of the same order and has the same information. There were a couple that I immediately eliminated out, and that was Fond du Lac and De Pere. They're much larger cities, so I thought that they perhaps weren't as relevant. I also went down and I ended up with Whitewater and Toma as being the closest to being a municipality such as Elkhorn. But one of the things that Jason did, which to me is a great help, is that instead of, I know that the city attorney last time talked about rewriting the entire ordinance or wanting to see all new ordinances. Jason and I have been in some discussion, and he provided you with what you see in front of you, which is our ordinance, which on the right-hand side, and it was provided to you tonight on paper. And on the right-hand side, what language changes need to be done to our current ordinance. He was very complimentary to us because he said that our ordinance actually was quite good, just the way it was, you know, for the time. So it's, I guess, up to this group whether you want to create an entirely new ordinance or just update our current language in some sections, which actually there's only 7 areas that need to be updated in ours. And I think Jason can further explain what those changes are. He is somebody with a great deal of experience. He's been doing this since 1996. And So he has a lot of experience in administering these preservation policies and practices and writing ordinances and helping communities do so.
So basically, you're saying that we don't have to rewrite the ordinance, is that right?
Correct.
Right.
We just have to do these small
The
additions.
update, yes.
Yeah, Jason, and he can speak to this too, but he had mentioned to me that our ordinance is in pretty good shape. So if, as we discussed at the last meeting, if we give the HPC authority to act on their own so that we're not reviewing the projects after the HPC reviews the projects, he outlined a couple of different areas that would need to be updated in our ordinance, but hypothetically, instead of a complete overhaul or code section rewrite, we could just do an amendment, which I think would be much more cost effective.
That was my point. I think that we didn't know after the last meeting what it was gonna cost to do that. And that number, I never really knew what the real number was, but I did realize after that, that it was quite a lot of money to do that. Where if this does the same thing that both the city and the Historical Society
HPC,
wants,
mhm.
then I'd rather see this being done if that pleases both sides.
Oh, yeah, I agree. Jason, could you review maybe the changes you're suggesting on our ordinance and exactly how that would work?
Sure. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. So I made several comments on your ordinance. Not all of them are critical to the certified local government program. And let me step back just a minute and say that I run the Certified Local Government Partnership Program. This is a program that the city has expressed some interest in joining and being certified as a certified local government partner. The big benefit of CLG certification is that you have access to no match grant funding to do historic preservation planning projects. So a survey to identify what's out there in your city that does have historic importance. And then you can also use grant funding to then nominate those properties to the National Register. And that brings tax credits to property owners. So I like to think of it as kind of a cycle of that we fund with grant funding of identification of historic properties, then nomination, and then getting those tax credits into the built environment of your city. So to make your ordinance meet the requirements of the program, and the program is defined, it's a federal program that comes from the National Park Service. And the program is designed to get federal funding down to, through state offices like mine, to local municipalities around the country. So every state has a CLG program, but it's a federal program defined by the National Park Service. The states can add requirements onto that. So that's a long way of saying, in order to meet the requirements of the program, your ordinance, there's really one of these changes that I outline in here is critical for meeting the requirements, and that is the one that I think it was Julie mentioned earlier, that your Historic Preservation Commission needs to have that quasi-judicial authority to review projects and issue approval permits, essentially permits for those projects. Right now, I think your commission is advisory to Plan Commission. So that's the biggest thing that would need to change. And all of this is voluntary. I want to clarify that the CLG program is voluntary. Partners that get certified under the program just simply need to be willing to and want to implement some historic preservation program in their city. So if that's one of the objectives in Elkhorn, you're a good candidate for the CLG program. So I'm just looking down the document that I submitted with my comments. The first one at 1711.5, paren 1A. I just suggested that you define landmarks and landmark sites. The list of definitions does not include landmarks or landmark sites, but then subsequently in this chapter, you do use those terms. So you should define those. And that may be something that the National Park Service would say, yeah, to be a CLG, you need to define those. Then the second one at same section, 1711.5, just down one section into paren B. Oh, that's what I mentioned earlier, that the Historic Preservation Commission needs to have that quasi-judicial authority to issue permits or certificates of appropriateness for alterations to properties that are designated under the provisions of this section. Let's see, the next one is the following page, paren C. Oh, this is similar to the previous one, that the HPC would simply need to have that quasi-judicial authority to, in cases of demolition as well. There are other ways to do demolition permits, and we can talk about those if you want to get into that. But generally speaking, most cities see demolition as an alteration to a historic property, and therefore just treat it like another form of alteration. And so this section would need to comply with the other section, giving the Historic Preservation Commission that permitting authority. The next one is on the following page at 1711-7, paren 1. And this is a rescission provision. If you're going to have a rescission provision in your ordinance that enables the Historic Preservation Commission, Plan Commission, or anyone to rescind the designation of a historic property, in order to be a CLG, that rescission can only be based on the condition of the property. Some cities have tried to base that rescission on something like the ability of the owner to sell the property. You can do that. That's a perfectly legitimate reason to rescind a property, but you can't be a CLG with rescission based on anything but the condition of the property. So what I said is typically, in order to be a CLG, you would have to base rescission of the designation on the property being destroyed by a fire, a tornado, a natural disaster, or for some other reason that it becomes deteriorated. That is not through the fault of the owner. It's not owner neglect. Hopefully that makes sense. It's a little complicated. I can explain more if you need that. But basically, a rescission, you can have a rescission provision to rescind that designation, but it has to be based on the condition of the property. That is not the fault of the owner. It's not based on owner neglect. The next one down at paren D. This is another comment about rescinding the designation, which I just discussed. So we'll skip that one. And the next one, paren E, is the same. Let's see. And the last one on the last page, 1711-8. What's my comment here? Oh, this is just, you have the Wisconsin Historic Building Code in here. That code is no longer valid. Um, this comes from our model ordinance that we shared around in the 90s. Uh, the state of Wisconsin no longer uses the historic building code. Instead, the state uses chapter 12 of the International Existing Building Code. And that's freely available online. And your inspection folks may already be familiar with this code, the IEBC. I'm not a code expert, so I can't explain how it works in terms of adoption. You may need to adopt the code locally. I'm not sure. The state has adopted the International Existing Building Code, but I'm not sure if that applies to all jurisdictions within the state. Your inspection folks may know that better than I would. But my recommendation is just to take that out of there. You could replace it with a provision that mentions the IEBC Chapter 12 for historic buildings. And those are my comments. The main two amendments that you would need to make to be a CLG are to give that quasi-judicial permitting authority to the Historic Preservation Commission and clarify your rescission provision. Under what circumstances would you permit rescinding historic designation?
Thank you, Jason. Does anyone have any questions for Jason?
Jason, I just have a quick question for you. When you see communities that are potentially exploring the idea of becoming a certified local government, and it's something they've never done before, do you see community pushback on that?
Yes, in fact, those two issues are the most commonly pushed back on. And when these requirements of the CLG program are based on best practices for local historic preservation programs dating back to the 1930s. The first local historic preservation program in the United States was in Charleston, South Carolina in 1931. And ever since then, over 250, 300, there's hundreds of local jurisdictions have adopted similar ordinances. They're based on the same constitutional validity as zoning codes. And I can get into the whole legal background of that, but I don't think that's where we need to go right now. But yes, those two provisions are usually the ones that cities and villages, jurisdictions wanting to be CLGs, those are the ones that they get a little hesitant on. And what I tell them is that to be a CLG, to take advantage of the CLG program, you have to have those tools in your toolbox, but how you use those tools is completely up to you. And it is subject to your local democratic processes, right? You also need to be aware that there's a state statute that allows property owners to appeal any decision of the Landmarks Commission, Historic Preservation Commission, to the city council. So a lot of cities will say, well, this is giving a lot of power to an appointed body rather than an elected body. And that may be true, but there is that state statute that allows property owners to appeal the decision of that appointed body to the elected body. Also, I tell historic preservation commissions, don't think of this as a magic wand that you can just go around and designate any property that you want. Legally, you could do that, but there's a political cost to that. And it's not, you have to be a team player in local government, in your community. It gives you the authority to do that. Well, actually, yours does not. Yours gives the commission the authority to recommend designation to, I think, the plan commission. And that's fine. That's great. That's the way most CLGs do it. But again, you should no commission should think of it as a magic wand to just go around designating any property they see fit. They do need to be sensitive to community tolerances, and the community that they live in. So that's what I tell local governments that are interested in the CLG program.
Just want to interject real quickly. I met with Pat Blackmere again this afternoon, and we were going through some things. She was here last time. And I think you remember that she made the comment that in, for example, designating a local landmark, someone's private home, okay, that the group thinks would be great, you know, to have a nice plaque out in front and be part of the walking tour for tourism and everything. And she said, we could just wave that magic wand and designate them. But she said, to be respectful, it's her philosophy, and I certainly agree with her. She approaches the owner, talks with the owner, explains everything to them so that they understand what it's all about and what responsibilities they may have in the future. And I think that that's the right way to approach any of these designations.
Did she say some property owners turned that offer down?
Not one.
Not one. Okay.
The other thing is when that's done, just so you know, there's a public hearing. And so there's a public hearing. Let's say they want to designate, I'm going to use 12 North Church Street. And so they put the notice in the paper and everything for the public hearing. And I said, how many people ever show up? And she said, in my entire career, which she's been doing this a long time on and off in Whitewater, they had one person show up throughout all the years. And the person was concerned that their property value was going to go down if their neighbor was designated as historic and of interest and would be part of a walking tour. Well, she squashed that, you know, idea of wouldn't do that at all. In fact, it probably increased their property value. But that was the only one that she ever had.
So I guess I have some questions. So Jason, earlier you were talking about Burlington as a certified local government, correct?
Yes. Yep. Burlington is.
Yeah. So, but if you look under their historic preservation section of their code 315-113B powers, it says that they make recommendations to the council, and the council has the ultimate authority to issue those certificate of appropriateness. So how are they eligible to be a CLG if they're advisory?
That's a good question. That provision does not meet the requirements of the CLG program. That indicates to me that at some point they changed that provision in their code, and nobody at my office has noticed that. One of the requirements of being a CLG is that you send me the minutes of your HPC meetings, and you do an annual report. And in that annual report, it's an online report that I send you a link to, and you just answer all the questions. One of the questions in that annual report is, have you made amendments to your historic preservation code this year? And I would have to go back to Burlington and see if they indicated that they had made those amendments, and nobody caught it. I didn't catch it. So that's a provision that now is in violation of the CLG requirements, and that I'll have to look into.
Do you think there's a chance they may have changed their code after initially signing up?
Yes, that's definitely what happened. Yeah.
Know if in fact they did change it, and why. Also, just, you know, you pointed out earlier that they are typically our appeal processes. And I would agree that reading the samples you provided from Toma and Whitewater, they also both do have appeals to the council. So I guess my question is, you know, planning commissions were created for the intent of obviously alleviating councils from having, you know, all these, you know, land use decisions as well as everything else that they're dealing with. But you're saying, let's take the planning commission out of that process and now putting that burden on the council to then have to be that appeal. But yet the reality is in these communities, they have an appeal process. So I'm trying to understand, why would you say, hey, let's get the planning commission out of this process because we don't want them to be involved, but yet we do acknowledge there needs to be an appeal process. So let's have that appeal process be the council. I mean, I'm glad there's some appeal, but I'm just saying, to me, it seems a little odd that you would acknowledge there needs to be an appeal, but say, hey, it can't be the planning commission. Like that to me just seems odd.
Well, that does not come from the CLG program. The CLG program was originally set up that way to the requirements of the CLG program do not include that appeal process. So that was never a part of the CLG program to begin with. That appeal is a state statute that came into being, I believe it was 2017 or 18, that was added to the state enabling legislation. So they happened at different times. These provisions were not created to work together. Does that make sense? So the CLG program never intended there to be an appeal process. The state came in and did that in 2018.
And
So
do you know
that's
why did the state do that?
it was a provision that was part of a bill that was intended to make some changes to the state level enabling legislation. And that was one of the provisions that was adopted at that time. There were a couple others that were adopted at the time. Some were not adopted, but that was one that was adopted into the state enabling legislation at the time.
And just some other things too that I don't think have been covered. I'm looking at the website about the Wisconsin requirements for CLGs. It says, one, they have to enact and enforce a historic preservation ordinance that regulates historic property. Okay. It says the CLG must provide annual reporting to the State Historical Preservation Office on CLG activities. A CLG must send copies of meeting minutes and agendas to SHPO following each meeting. The ordinance must not allow historic property owners to opt out of local historic designation.
Right.
Designation must not require owner consent.
Yep.
And the commission must approve work on locally designated properties, and recommendations may not be advisory.
Yep.
Yeah. So it seems like this is structured to eliminate the consent from owners to be involved in this process.
Yeah, that's that. I was kind of addressing that earlier when I said how you use these tools is up to you. To be a CLG voluntary program, you have to have those provisions. You can't have an opt-out provision for, and again, this is based on about 80 years of local historic preservation program policy best practices. You can't, right? You can't allow property owners to opt out. The city has to have the ability to designate over the objection of an owner, but you don't have to. How you use the ordinance is up to you. And that's what I was saying earlier, that it is subject to your local democratic processes. It's appealable to the council. So, and it shouldn't be used as a magic wand, right? The HPC.
It shouldn't be used as a magic wand. why do your program requirements say that it has to be used as a magic wand and say that owners don't have any consent?
Because that's the way that the federal program was created. And again, it's based on these programs in cities for the last 80 years. The city needs to have the ability, the authority to protect properties that are a benefit to the entire community. That's the idea. And if a property meets those criteria and is historic, meets those criteria, it doesn't matter what the current owner feels about that designation. The current owner, when you think about a property, historic properties have a series of owners. The owner right now is just the current owner. That a property is going to be owned by a different person in 10, 15, 20 years. And it was owned by a dozen people previous to that. So the principle is that municipalities need to have that tool, that ability to protect properties that are a benefit to the entire community. That's
And then just
That's-
lastly, I hear you talk about the benefits of the CLG status, and you talk a lot about there's these grants available, but the grants, from what I can see, you'd be eligible for up to $25,000, and it's for planning. It's not actually for doing work; it's for planning to do the work. Is the way that I read the state's guidelines. The other two benefits are the ability to comment on the National Register of Historic Places nominations within municipal boundaries before they are sent to the State Historic Preservation Review Board. And the third benefit is the eligibility to authorize the use of Chapter 11 of the International Existing Building Code for locally designated historic buildings. Those are the three benefits of this program, according to your website.
Yep, that is actually, that page is a little old. It's a little outdated. You don't have to be a CLG to use the International Existing Building Code. We need to change that. The other benefit that I typically refer to is that you have access to the expertise in our office. And that expertise includes archaeologists, burial sites experts, everyone who helps local units of government in Wisconsin comply with state and federal historic preservation laws. So you're not out on your own when it comes to compliance with all those laws. You have a direct line of communication to our office. So, but again, the grant funding is typically the biggest draw. And again, I'll emphasize, this is a voluntary program. If the city of Elkhorn sees the value in having a program that protects historic properties for the good of the community, it might be a good program for you. If that's not a goal of the city of Elkhorn, then it may not be a good program for you.
Well, thanks for answering my questions. Appreciate it.
I see on Zoom here, we've got Tim Pruitt here from the city attorney's office. Tim, have you been following the conversation about rewriting the ordinance and certified local governments? Do you have a opinion on some of that?
Well, like Jason said, there's no sense in reinventing the wheel if we just need to make a few tweaks. It really comes down to a policy decision for you. One thing that was mentioned in our practice, occasionally we've run across developments that the municipality wanted, and the developer was able to tap into the historic tax credits, which was helpful in those situations. But it was a completely voluntary situation where areas were being designated and they were included in a TID district and helped to further the project. So I have not seen situations where municipalities, over the objections of the property owners, designated properties as historic, because that has repercussions going forward in terms of what the owner can and cannot do with that property. But no, it's great. We've got all these experts involved, and I certainly don't see any need to do a complete rewrite of the ordinances. It just needs to be updated if the council so directs.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Does anyone else have some questions?
I don't have any questions, but can we get back to square one on the 5 pages that we originally started talking about?
Okay,
Which is Article 1711 of the City of Elkhorn Building Code that describes the HPC. And it's my understanding out of the conversation if we make a this commission makes a recommendation to the common council that they amend 1711 ordinance with the provisions or the highlighted changes in here, we will be up to date and in better shape, up to code, and save the city the cost of writing a new ordinance.
I think I'd agree with that. Yeah.
Okay, so I move for that recommendation. To send this, to approve this to council. To have them approve the amendment to the building code to cover the HPC.
I guess I'll second that so we can get to discussion. Would we need to see a final copy of that? Because they're talking about definitions of landmark and landmark sites and
Yeah.
whatnot. And I'm not opposed to that at
Yeah.
all. I'm just saying, I think before we send it to
I
council.
guess, yeah, if we
Mayor?
get a corrected copy at our next meeting to get
Okay,
to
yep.
Can I interject?
Absolutely.
There are some other areas within our code that refers to going back. Remember, last month, you voted to give us more authority. And within our code, there are other statements, and this is for the city attorney, that refer always back to the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission, I think some of that language needs to be referred to either HPC or city council. But there's some other little language that's very minute where it just says, refers to the Plan Commission frequently.
So I
So
just
that
want
needs to
to,
be cleaned up too. That's all I'm saying.
I want to interject here for a second because I think in one of the meetings we had, and it was the last meeting or the meeting before, you had made a motion and I don't remember the exact words I said, but it was basically in regards to making sure the common council would still be involved, maybe in an appeals process or overlook this. So when we talk about giving full authority, and this is just my opinion, but this goes back to in elected officials, and I do believe the common council still needs to have oversee this in some fashion. If that disregards the chance of getting a credit or some kind of like tax credit and makes you guys not full authority, I completely understand a lot of these conversations of what you're saying, and you know but I still think the common council needs to be involved at this point if you're going to take the plan commission out. So I just
On an appeal, they would be, correct?
That's
According
the
to
way it
the
sounds.
changes?
Yeah.
they
Changes do not address that at all.
in here you're removing the planning commission and those two. It's in order to give them full authority. Hold on.
The ordinance, if it was updated, the appeal process would be through the state statute. It's not currently outlined in our local ordinance. That's something that could be added, but it is a state statute that the appeal process would go to the common council.
Not to stray too far, we do have a motion on the table. And the way I'd take that motion, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, that we would work on getting a final draft of this.
Correct.
And then when we approve the final draft, we would send it on to council.
Correct.
So I'm not putting words in your mouth, am I?
No.
Okay.
I just have one question. If we make these proposed changes and provide you all with a draft of the updated ordinance, this then would potentially give the HPC the authority to apply to become a certified local government. If that is not something the city of Elkhorn is currently interested in, is that a policy decision that has to go to council before the HPC can start that process? Because I don't know if we're ready to start that process. We're looking at ordinance amendments right now, simple ordinance amendments to update our code. But I don't think at this point we're ready to just apply to become a certified local government.
Without council approval.
Right. I
is
think
what I'm
other
hearing.
people need to be involved in that decision.
Mayor, I'm
Yes.
going to ask Jason to kind of elaborate as to kind of how other communities have, in his experience in handling these. Once they've decided to move in this direction, then how do they approach the application process?
The application process to be a CLG is fairly simple. And it's in the CLG manual that I believe I sent Julie or Allison. If not, I can send it. It's a fairly simple process. You just submit a letter from the chief elected official expressing interest in the program. Send me a copy of your current code text, a listing of your HPC members, and that's pretty much it. I'll go over your code and make sure it meets all the requirements. I send it to the Park Service. They go over your code, make sure it meets all the requirements, and then they certify you. There may be local processes, there are likely local processes that you would need to go through to get approval to apply. That's up to you all. But it's a fairly simple application process. Does that answer your question?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you. Tim, do you have an opinion on that? Should that be going, before we get too far down this road, should this be going to the council?
Well, I mean, you have a policy decision to make, and that should be at the council level. And assuming the council's, in accord with this direction, then you can spend the time and the effort to update your ordinances. I think that's the way it should go.
So you're saying that at this point, we bring it before the council now to see if they're in favor of moving forward?
Right. I mean, I think you got a lot of people here that are doing a lot of good work, and there's a lot of effort and time involved. But it would seem to me that if the council's not going to be in favor of this approach, it'd be nice to know that sooner rather than later.
I would agree with that. I think it would be a good option to advise the council of what's going on. If we make these ordinance amendments, it's taking all authority from the plan commission out of it. It's taking all council authority out of it unless they appeal. We hope that people don't appeal. I mean, we don't want appeals to occur. So, we don't want to use that as just there's always the option for them to appeal to the council. It's our hope that we have a great process for these things so that individuals and community members don't have to use that appeal process. So I think we need to make sure that the council wants to see the HPC acting under their own authority versus acting as an advisory board. And then we need to ensure that the council is agreeable to us making ordinance updates and amendments and moving forward with this process. If they're agreeable to ordinance amendments and updates, we also need to ensure that if the certified local government process begins, that the council is aware of that and it goes before that. That's my opinion, that it should go before the council before that process begins as well. And I don't know if Adam has anything else to add.
No, I mean, I think you and Tim have highlighted that I think, council should definitely be aware of it, and council should probably, indicate whether they would want the council to actually formally authorize an application to the CLG. Should that be a direction we go? There should be a formal city resolution saying that, the city does want to apply for it, as opposed to just,
So do we need a motion to? put
Yeah,
this in front of
I
the-
guess, how do we,
Can I interject something
Yes,
here?
yeah,
I guess
Julie?
I'm not following things. At the last meeting, you voted unanimously
yes.
to allow the Historic Preservation Commission authority. and to approve grant improvement applications and forward everything to the city council, not to the plan commission anymore. You took yourselves out of it. So now I don't understand why suddenly some of you want to go back into it.
I thought, are we just talking about going to the council? No? Here, we're not talking about the planning commission anymore. We're talking about
Yeah, we're just,
Council?
going to council.
council just needs to review this.
I will say that if we go to council, council's gonna say, they look to Tim and I and they say, well, how did the planning commission feel about this?
Well, I think we passed a motion.
And we passed the motion, so that'll have to go in that direction,
That's correct.
definitely. Not at this meeting, but the meeting previously.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times they just count on Tim and I relaying to them, what happens at a planning commission meeting.
But
Of course, Peter's here for this one, but other than that, it's just Tim and I.
Yeah, but
Yes?
updating the ordinance doesn't give us any authority. We still have to go through that process.
we still have
Well,
to.
if
go
We're
to
just
council.
making the changes
I think,
that it's in compliance so we can.
I think we're talking about getting some buy-in from the council, so this isn't a
Oh,
big
yeah.
surprise down the road.
Yeah, no objection with that.
Okay, so how do we handle the motion on the table?
I'd make a motion to put this in and for review in front of the common council and for.
Well, we've already got a motion on the table. Yeah,
Oh,
there's
you
a
do
motion
it,
on the
okay.
floor.
And we just need a second, so I'll second it.
So I think we already seconded it, so.
Yeah, we were at discussion. So,
Mhm.
and that was the motion was to put together an ordinance. So I think that motion probably needs to be voted on, but voted down, so somebody can make a motion.
Unless
To-
we withdraw the motion.
Yeah, that too.
Tim, I thought at the very beginning of this, this was just strictly a discussion and we were not voting on anything.
That's a point.
So I thought that was what we were talking about, was discussing this and our next steps.
I think you'd only be voting on the next step, which would be to get the council involved, but not, you're not voting on an ordinance amendment. You're not voting on an ordinance change. You are voting on the idea to bring this discussion forward to the council and make sure that they're on board. It would then come back to us.
Because really, at the end of the day, we're an advisory committee, right? So we are still advising and we're still putting it forth. So we really can't. So I 100% agree. Put it forth in front of the common council and see what their thoughts are. So
The motion's just to update this and bring it back
I
with the
understand.
final.
I guess my
not-
point would be, we don't want to spend money and update that ordinance until we have a little buy-in from the council. They understand what's going on, because they're ultimately responsible for ordinance changes.
And to add to that, if you do update it per the comments on here, you are removing the planning commission on certain.
No, you're not removing them.
Says right here. So you got 3 different spots in here that if we were to update this per the comments, and you got 2 to 3 different areas that you're going to be removing and giving full power.
I think we've already done that.
And that's,
We've done that last meeting.
we advised, but that's what
No,
I'm
we-
saying. I'm like, we still
We
common
gave
council.
them,
We have not given, we voted on the agreements that you'd like to see that they're no longer advisory, but we made no actual changes. So until the ordinance is actually updated, the HPC is still an advisory board. So you made the general consensus, you were all agreeable to the idea of the HPC making their own decisions and no longer being advisory to the Plan Commission, but nothing happens until we actually move forward with an ordinance amendment. They're still advisory until the ordinance changes.
I guess I'm still looking for help how to deal with this motion.
Well,
Tim, do you have a,
Sure. I think Allison's Correct. You either vote on the motion, which was to update the ordinance, bring it back to this group and review it. And you take a vote on that motion.
Well-
Or the maker of the motion and the second, retract their motion and their second. And with the acquiescence of the body, you could go on to your next motion, which would be to send it on to the council for discussion. So you've got one or two routes to go.
Council has to make they're the ones that vote on the approval of this final anyhow, so okay.
So you want to vote on your motion?
Yep.
Okay. So, everyone's clear on the motion? It's been a while.
Motion was to adopt what the
To
changes that we've seen here tonight. in
to
front
get a
of us.
final copy
Get a final copy.
and bring it back.
Yep.
Okay. Sherry, you want to give us a roll call? So I can't.
Minell,
Yes.
Geeslin,
No.
Boardman,
Yes.
Stocko,
No.
Hunter,
No.
Watke,
No.
Schroeder.
No. This is a joint meeting, don't the HPC people get a vote too?
Okay.
Don't, am I right on that? Yeah.
Taylor, Gunyon, Brillianthan, Welsh, Carroll, Harvey,
No.
you have 6 noes and 1, 2, 4 yeses.
Okay. So the motion fails. Rick, were you gonna?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to put this in front of the Common Council for review. And upon Allison's comments, I don't want to, I guess I could just say put it in front of the Common Council for review.
Second that. We got a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
What are they gonna review?
I think we're just gonna tell them what we're doing. So they're aware of it.
Yeah. What do you want them to review?
Basically, to find out whether or not this is going to be something they would like to move forward with to give power to the HPC in regards to a lot of these changes in the ordinance, if they're willing to move forward with that. And then, are they going to be part of the appeals process? I wanted to make sure that was something that, the Common Council will still be able to be part of, or,
Yeah, I don't think the council members know what a certified local government is.
and I think that's why they need to
Program.
get more involved in this. I think this
Just
is,
so they're aware.
yeah.
I think it's just an opportunity for the council to view it too. I think it's been, brought up a couple of times. If we write the ordinance right now and then it gets to the council level and the council says, why are we doing this? And they don't understand the conversations that we've had here in these joint meetings, they're going to be confused as to why we delegated hundreds of dollars for our great but costly attorneys to put this ordinance amendment together for them when they were never aware of it in the first place. So I think it's just a good idea to make them aware of what's going on, make sure that they're on board before we allocate funds to changing this ordinance.
Okay. Did we have to vote on that? Let's do a roll call vote on that too.
Minell,
What are we voting on now?
Just send it to council to review.
Yes.
Geeslin,
Yes.
Boardman,
Yes.
Stocko,
Yes.
Hunter,
Yes.
Watke,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Gunyon, Brillianthan, Welsh, Carroll, Harvey.
Yes.
The motion passes. So we'll get that on the agenda the earliest possible.
Can't be the next meeting. Have to be the one after
Can
that,
be-
right?
Right, yeah, we
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
get that for
So it'll
Monday.
be in June.
Mhm.
We'd be looking at June.
We're not gonna have, we're
Second?
not gonna have it. We're having a meeting on, June.
Yeah, June, yeah.
June 2nd.
Okay. Is that our next step then? Do we have anything else to discuss?
I don't think so, and I'd be happy to attend that council meeting too, so that, we can facilitate the discussion. Jason's online. If you feel like it's something, maybe you could offer the invitation to him. I don't know. That's up to you. But I'd be happy to be there. And then from that point, depending upon what they say, then after that council meeting, I can reach back out, schedule the next joint meeting, work with Tim, and the attorney's office to, bring back whatever we're bringing back to the joint meeting.
Okay, thank you. Anyone have anything else? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.